Yes, finally. Alright, so, welcome back to another review. This time, we're taking a look at the ZMF Auteurs, and we're comparing them against my babies, the Sennheiser HD600s. So, I've read and heard from many people, that the Auteurs are a 600-line lover's endgame. It's the light at the end of the tunnel, or so they say. Well, the goal of today's video is to determine whether the ZMF Auteurs really are that final step down the road for many of us. Let me know down below if this video was helpful for you. Also, you know the deal. Like, comment, subscribe, and let's jump in. So let's begin with the contents, build quality, and comfort. What sort of items do you get for such a stark increase in price? Well, you get the Auteurs delivered in a seahorse travel case rather than the cardboard box. You also get a braided cable rather than a standard rubberized cable, even though both are single-ended. And you get a unit-specific warranty ID card for any sort of repairs or issues that may arise. Now, as far as the build on each is concerned, they couldn't be any different. Generally speaking, the HD600s feature a more traditional design that shows how durable it is, but doesn't necessarily look like something that was also designed to be admired. The Auteurs, on the other hand, look like an absolute work of art. It's clear they were designed to withstand the test of time while looking ever so elegant on your desk or even next to a fine bottle of scotch and a vinyl setup playing out of a tube amp. The HD600s feature a mostly plastic build with nuggets at the top of the headband for comfort, while the Auteurs feature nothing but metal and wood, offering a padless headband that can be modified to fit the shape or clamp the user desires. All you gotta do is bend it up here, creates the bend right here, or bend it here on the sides, which creates the bend on the sides. I'll go ahead and link the YouTube video for ZMF himself, Mr. Big Zach down below. I'll go ahead and link Big Zach's video down below. He can explain. You can go ahead and view his channel and see how to go ahead and do that. I'm not going to do that here. I already set these up exactly the way I want them to, or at least as best as I could. Now, while the HD600s utilize a commonly found dual 2-pin connector at the headphone end, the Auteurs utilize a not so commonly found dual-pin 3-pin XLR connector instead. They're definitely sturdier and more secure since they feature a locking mechanism to prevent them from being yanked out all of a sudden. Now, when it comes to comfort, here's where my tone starts to change a bit. I keep hearing from most people that ZMFs are some of the most comfortable headphones around, but in my experience, that's really not the case. I really hate to rain on the audiophile parade here, but the comfort difference is just, it's night and day. The HD600 feature just the right amount of clamp force and are extremely light because of the materials. On top of that, their design keep them close to the head, which make their weight feel far less impactful whenever I choose to move my head. The Auteurs, on the other hand, feature super thick pads, a noticeably heavier weight, and a lackluster headband. Now, for what it's worth, I don't think they're absolutely terrible in this department. I've definitely encountered similar builds with much worse implementations. Thing is, they just don't compare. The Auteurs try their best to reduce their presence on your head despite their bulky build, and they do a decent job at it, but the HD600s are a thin, lightweight headphone that just grabs on and says, okay, let's go. Now let's talk amplification here. Unsurprisingly, they're pretty similar in terms of efficiency. On the THX AAA789, my amplifier and a very popular staple, via single-ended, I ran both headphones at 11 AM or PM, whatever, on gain 2. Now through balance connections, I also ran both at 1030 on gain 1. So yeah, extremely similar, honestly. And now let's approach the sound portion here. The following impressions were taken without the use of any EQ whatsoever. Modifications to the sound will be discussed in the notes and observations portion of this review. Now with that out of the way, let's begin. And so we start off with the bass. Yeah, this ain't no competition. The Auteurs deliver the low end in style. I mean, I've always respected the HD600 line's bass response, despite the very quick and apparent roll-off. I think they reproduce some pretty accurate bass for the majority of tracks, particularly those that don't really need that sub-bass rumble underneath. But good God, the Auteurs deliver. I mean, wow. And thing is, it's clear to hear that the Auteur's drivers are extremely capable of reproducing some really, really intense bass notes. I mean, if you recall from the individual review, when I was using the X bass function on the Auteur's, even I thought it was too much bass. Oh god, what was that? Oh fuck. Quiet home at 3 in the morning. That is not a good combination. Also Buchanan's. Definitely not a good combination either. If you recall from the individual review, when I used the X bass function on the Auteur's, even I thought it was too much bass. And it wasn't that the bass response was flabby. It was just too much. But anyways, back to the topic at hand. Kick drums are plentiful on the HD600. I've always thought so. I don't have any complaints on these. The Auteur's, however, they turn it up by just a smidge, but then they give this tasty smack to the texture. I mean, it's like not just kick drums, but bass notes have this sticky, tangible type of sound, like this layer of peanut butter on a piece of warm toast, straight out of the toaster. Just, So I'll give a quick example here. The Game of Love by Santana and Michelle Branch. Let me tell you what the low end sounds like in this one. With the HD600s, the mids and the highs represent this general ball of sound up here, okay? Imagine this is your soundstage. Then you have the low end, in this example, the bass guitar notes, serving as a sort of like a platter or cradle down here, coexisting with the other sounds, separate but equal. Maybe I shouldn't use that phrase, but you get the point. Imagine this, ball of sound, plate. This is what it sounds like. The Auteur's, on the other hand, create sound much like an onion. It's a big bundle of sound right down the middle, but each sound is a layer starting at the very core, all the way to the outer edges. But get this, in terms of presence, the Auteur's just barely bring that bass guitar more forward. Just barely. And I mean that in a good way. It's not about the forwardness, it's about the presentation. Like it blends in so well while remaining separate. And now sub bass. Well, yeah, the Auteur demolished the HD600s here by a landslide. See, here's what happens. The HD600 roll off pretty quickly, so there's not a whole lot of sub bass to them. But they have a considerable hump in the lower mid bass before that roll off happens. That saves it from being absolutely boring in genres like EDM that are bass dependent, and to be frank, I do enjoy them quite a bit with EDM too. I have no issues with these. But then you listen to the Auteur's, and you find out what you were missing. The beat comes to life, the clock strikes 12, and you realize that the best part of the night has just begun. Seriously though, there's this entirely different level of bass that the Auteur's introduce, and I'm not just talking about the quality or the quantity, I'm especially referring to that timbre, like that special peanut butter on toast type of timbre, like Now let's discuss the mids here. Truth be told, there is a notable difference in the mids. It's what many people experience when they upgrade to the higher end headphone. You know how it is. You thought you knew a sound until you hear it from a better driver. After going back to the previous headphone, it just quite isn't the same. Although I personally am not a huge mids guy, that is to say I'm not very critical about it so long as they're not terrible. There's a level of detail and realness added to the instruments that I just can't deny it. Like, they're clearer, they sound more natural, and they're closer to what might be considered, just like the real thing. Now, vocals are just about as forward on either of the two. However, due to the way that the Auteurs lay out the various sounds, and more on that later, vocals have much more room to breathe and stand on their own without the feeling of being, squished next to the other instruments. Something that the HD600s can suffer a bit from due to their more narrow soundstage. And now let's discuss the treble here. So treble's a bit of a toss-up for me. The Auteurs present the treble somewhere in between the forwardness of the HD600 and the HD650. The amount of spice is about equal to the HD600 though, so kudos to it there. While one would think that I'd be into that, I actually find myself wanting a bit more treble presence from the Auteurs at times. Now the timbre's great, it's just not the intensity. It reminds me of why I bought the HD600s despite already owning a pair of 6XX, Massdrop's version of the HD650. People thought I was just throwing money away, but I'm telling you, it was worth every penny to get there. Every penny. Do not regret this one bit. While the HD600 are the airiest of the HD600 line, they still have a teensy bit of that veil up top. While I will say that the Auteurs do have a slight amount of extra air up there over the HD600, I wouldn't go so far as to call them very airy either. As far as sibilance is concerned, the Auteurs are a tad, and I mean a tad, more sibilant than the HD600s. But I must say, it should be a very easy adjustment even for those of you who main the HD650s. And by adjustment, I mean getting used to it, not EQ. Hoo boy, Soundstage and Imaging. Oof. Wow, where do I even begin here? I know, I'll start here. The Auteurs demolish the HD600 in every way. Even if you're a fan of a more narrow and intimate soundstage, which the HD600s are known for, the Auteurs outrank the HD600s in every way. If I had to rank the Auteurs in terms of width from a 1 to a 10, 1 being the most narrow, 10 being the widest, I'd give them a solid 7, maybe an 8. They're not the widest headphone I've heard, not absolutely like widest, but they're pretty up there. The HD600s are a solid 2, perhaps a 3 by comparison. Now here's the thing though, it's not just about the width of the headphones. The Auteurs know their width, and they know how to fit that space perfectly. This allows the Auteurs the ability to reproduce every instrument with such an incredible amount of clarity. On top of that, their imaging is it's mind-blowing. It's rightfully deserving of the Summit Phi badge, that is for sure. So this is a problem the HD600s do possess. Because of their narrow soundstage, they are limited with how they present multiple instruments at once. Even though they're detailed, and I still think they're excellent, the superiority of the Auteurs in this category, it's undeniable. It's just undeniable. I will mention this though. The HD600s are the more open sounding and feeling of the two. The Auteurs, beautiful and grand as they may be, do sound noticeably more closed off than I would care for. And now let's discuss some notes and observations. So as far as EQ is concerned, you all know I don't even touch my HD600s. Despite knowing they're not perfect, I'd highly rather leave them alone since I generally don't like messing with EQ in the first place. Now, I actually feel very similar with the Auteurs. They're magical, they really are. That said, this little modification to the overall sound give it a tiny little pep in its step. I don't feel that it's necessary for the majority of people, but for those of you who happen to be HD600 diehards and happen to get their hands on the Auteurs, try this out a little bit. It brings the mids a tad more forward, which makes them sound livelier, and it gives the treble that little extra sizzle that you may recall when swapping from the HD650s to the HD600s. I myself can take it or leave it, to be frank, but yeah. And now we've reached the conclusion here. So, are the ZMF Auteurs that fabled endgame for the HD600 line lovers? Are they the headphone that will allow you to sell those crusty old Sennys and make you jump on that wood? Giggity. Not exactly. Let me explain. Sound-wise, the Auteur are a very neutral headphone with a slightly warm and dark tilt to it. So like, if this is neutral, this right here are the Auteurs. The HD600s, however, are a more mid-focused headphone that puts treble slightly second and bass slightly below that. Now, based off of that general description, it doesn't sound like they'd sound alike, right? This is something you just have to hear for yourself. You gotta bite the bullet and you gotta buy a pair of these or go try them out at some display or try a friend's unit out. You gotta bite the bullet and try them out to see exactly what we, the reviewers, mean. So if they sound so similar, why not just sell your old HD600s? Well, here's the thing. I can easily use the Auteurs for any genre, any day, hands down, and I would love them. 100%. But I can easily use the HD600s for any situation, any day. It's not just about sound, it's about their comfort, their shape, their design, their weight, their power consumption, their clamp. It's all there. The Auteurs, while beautifully looking and sounding, they just don't roll with every situation. If I wanted to stand up and do something with them on, I better hope I don't have to move my head and look around. Or the Auteurs, well, they're going to slide right off. If I want to use them for a home theater setup and lay sideways on my couch with headphones on to watch a movie or something, the Auteurs' weight will be far too noticeable and just start sliding off my head. What I'm trying to get at is the HD600s are far more of a jack of all trades in far more situations than the Auteurs. So, Even if I were to buy a customized pair of Auteurs to use them as my daily driver in the future, because I may think of them as better HD600s, I would still keep my HD600s around and bust them out for that occasional moment when you gotta go back to the old times, you know? Remember what's good. But yeah, I think those are my 2 cents on this particular comparison. Very interesting one, very exciting one, considering the reputation behind this, you know? Tried and true versus new and bold. How could you resist? But anyway, yeah, that's going to do it for me. Again, don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Coming up next, we've got that final ZMF Blue versus the Modhouse Argons. Those should be pretty interesting. I'm just waiting for a balance cable to come in so that I can go ahead and do a full, thorough review and tell you, given all power provided, which is better and why, or what are the differences. Apart from that, we've got more comparisons for these coming up and a couple other DACs and amps to look at too. So pretty good stuff. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you in the next video. Okay, ciao.